Well, if we go back to 1971 in Portland, Oregon, a well-dressed man boarded a plane bound for Seattle, Washington. While in flight, he contacted the flight attendant, handed her a note that said, "I have a bomb, I'm hijacking the plane." And that started the story of D.B. Cooper. From there, they landed in Seattle, where he took on $200,000. And a dark, rainy night, they took off from Seattle, and somewhere in the night, he lowered the rear stairs and jumped out with parachutes, never to be seen again.
Tom Kay was a teenager at the time of D.B. Cooper's famous heist. He had no idea how much this mystery man would become a part of his life.
Although I knew about the caper, I never really took a big interest in it. It wasn't until I was contacted by a group that was working on the problem of the money that this kind of D.B. Cooper thing came into my life. The Cooper vortex sucks you in and doesn't let you out.
The problem of the money is that almost $6,000 of Cooper's ransom, matched thanks to serial numbers, was found 9 years after the hijacking on the shores of the Columbia River. And no one knows how it got there. Tom got the call because, as a paleontologist, he's experienced at analyzing old buried treasures.
The reason why the money is a big, big mystery is because the money was found 20 miles away from where we determined Cooper jumped. This is a big gap to cross for money. The bills were highly degraded, but the rubber bands were still intact on there. So this is one of the experiments that we did here. We took $1 bills, we wrapped a rubber band around them, and then we got ready to sink them in the water and see what would happen. So as you see, the money floats, but if there's a little bit of agitation, any wave action, the money loses its ability to float. Once we know it sinks to the bottom, we know that it's very unlikely that it will be able to roll down the river and get into the Columbia River over a great distance. So we still don't know how the money got 20 miles from where Cooper jumped to where it was found on Teenabout.
D.B. Cooper was very careful to leave no trace behind on the plane. Well, except for one big clue. This clip-on tie left on his seat as he leapt from the aircraft. Back in 1971, researchers didn't find much on it. But Tom has modern technology on his side.
Now that we knew that the tie existed, we theorized that perhaps they had never looked at the particles on the tie. The tie is particularly interesting as a piece of clothing because you never wash it.
The real tie is still locked up tight with the FBI, but Tom shows us how he got an extreme close-up look at what Cooper left behind.
So in order to get particles off of Cooper's tie, we have here what we call an electron microscope stub. I'm going to now pick this up, and we go onto the tie, we press it onto the tie, and we pick up particles. So now we have Cooper's particles from his tie on our stub. We then zoom in on this particle, and we have it on the screen here, and now we see something that's about the size of a blood cell, very, very small. This is a spectrometer that tells us what we've got going on. So here we find sulfur and chlorine and calcium, but more interesting, we find copper, and this is a very interesting discovery. We have nitrogen in here. Nitrogen is very interesting because you only find it in explosives and fertilizer. And since Cooper claimed he had a bomb on the plane, we never really knew if it was a real bomb or not.
Tom can also zoom in on Cooper's life before the hijacking.
We found some very rare items for 1971. Most notably, we found titanium metal on the tie. It was primarily only used in advanced military aircraft. So now we have him narrowed down to a pretty small field. He's in management or engineering in a titanium company that's processing titanium. We're not exactly sure how all of this plays together right now, but there is a lot of information to sort through.
Considering D.B. Cooper was a man in his 40s in 1971, he'll likely never be found alive. But that doesn't stop Tom from trying to figure out what happened on that cold November night once and for all.
The one thing that keeps me interested in this story is that it's a real story. It's a real mystery. It really happened, and he's really out there somewhere. He seemed like a guy that got caught in a bad situation, and he came up with such a fantastic, novel way to get away that you have to hand it to the guy. And he went out in a suit and a tie, for God's sakes. How much more style can you have than that?